Group stage is underway at Worlds, and it is not looking good for North America. We will try not to dwell on it too much, but we have to dive into how we ended up at the disaster that we are at. And then we got to talk about some LS drama, a little bit of Gamba stuff with a little bit of an update as of today. Things could change as of, I don't know, as things go on. But lots of opinions of people being not too happy with the Gamba stuff. We'll get into that later in the quick news section and the reason for your Europeans' success. Europe definitely bouncing back. Last week we were able to celebrate NA greater than EU, and then this week not even close. And I'm sure there are quite a few reasons as to why. Episode 103 of the Clown Fiesta podcast with Blue Jay and JNT 250. JNT, where do we start, man?
I mean, despite North America being in complete shambles, the games have been pretty entertaining for the most part. I mean, it's actually looking very, very competitive in terms of the top teams at the tournament. I think people came in with this idea that Genji was going to be, miles ahead of specific teams, and then China's top teams are also going to be looking very strong. But, apart from NA's failures, I mean, the LPL and the LCK have been really close. Europe is even right there with them, with arguably their strongest team actually having the worst record potentially, with G2 being 1-2. I know Rogue, they did win, but some people still valued G2 over Rogue for whatever reason. But
Yeah, coming
Rogue,
into the tournament, there was
Rogue is
still people saying
3-0.
G2's better. Yeah, I think that's fair. Some people were saying G2 was better. There was a lot of differing opinions, but yeah, you could argue their best team is either one, honestly.
But hey, Rogue is 3-0. That's I think the main thing to take away from the West. If we want to, the NA wants to try to latch onto EU here and just call ourselves the
Yeah.
West here. Like, hey, Rogue's 3-0. You go
There's
get
a
him,
few
dog.
things. There's a few things that happen just about every year around this time. One of them is NA starts looking at as the West. Now it's like, oh, how's the West doing? More so as a joke, I think, than anything. But some people literally do latch onto that because you got to cope whatever way you got. Then there's the regular annual what's wrong with NA talk, and we'll definitely get into that because there's always that. Well, I mean, I was gonna say that Reddit post, but there's always like 14 of them actually. So I guess those will keep coming out as time goes on. And we just do this every single year, and we have to remind people that yeah, it's a rude awakening, but it is the awakening that we get every year. North America just isn't as good as the other regions, and that's kind of what we're dealing with right now.
Yep, and it's once again the curse of the NA first seed for just
Now,
getting a pretty difficult group.
yeah, that's true. However, despite so you could argue that the groups are bad, and let's just get this out on the table. There's going to be a lot of copium takes this episode, guys, and I mean that's to be expected. Um, you could say yes, their groups are really difficult, and that is true. But this year, one of the things that is so different is that it's not just that. It feels like this year, absolutely everything that could go wrong is going wrong, and everything that is bad is being exposed. Like, there's some years where it's like, oh, well, I feel like we're drafting bad, or oh, we're not drafting to our comfort, and our players are just worse, and we have bad solo queue environment. And this year, it just feels like all of them are just being highlighted in so many ways. Um, and I think that's how you end up with an 09 start.
Yeah, I'm trying to think back to like what the worst start was, because obviously where the whole meme originated was the 0-10, where they went in the second week of the group stage, they lost every single one of their games, plus Cloud9 lost a tiebreaker. But I'm trying to think of if there was ever another 09 or worse week, and I don't think there is. I think it's that 0-10 second week of group stage, and now it's this one. And if we want to start off with the copium, in Cloud9's case, they are, for whatever reason, the team that continues to make miracles happen when it comes to performing at the World Championship. They were 0-3 last year, looked pretty terrible. They made it out somehow. Do I think it's going to happen? No way I think it's going to happen, because you could argue that Cloud9's 0-3 and the way that they looked right now have been way worse from what was going on in 2021, where they were at least competitive in some of these games, but were kind of throwing away their leads. It just does not look competitive at all. They just look so on the back foot in all phases of the game.
I know that we're talking specifically about Cloud9 here, but I feel like that sentiment can be passed around just to about every single team. At least every team has at least had one game where the game is over very quick and not even close, right? And not even like salvageable, it feels like. But with Cloud9, I think the biggest surprise with Cloud9 is how hard they're losing in just some of their laning phases specifically. Like, don't get me wrong, I don't expect Fudge to be better than his counterpart in all these matchups or Jensen to be better than Faker or anything like that. But we have seen them hang around in the past, and then it's sort of at the 15-20 minute mark that things start to fall apart. But by the 15-20 minute mark, they're fucking smashed in some of these matchups.
Yeah,
And
like
that's
5K plus gold down.
yeah, and that's what's so well different, but also just surprising. Again, you don't expect them to win these matchups, but you don't expect the lanes to be over by 5 to 10 minutes. Usually, you stick around till past laning phase before things start to fall apart, and that's just not even the case. And so you're seeing there's no way back into some of these games.
Yeah, I mean, they're just simply getting outclassed in every single lane. We kind of became accustomed to Jensen and Fudge winning their lanes towards the end of the summer season when the playoffs came around. And a lot of the talk around Cloud9 specifically was they're just better than their opponents individually. And it just seems like it's the complete opposite in all three of these games that we've seen from Cloud9. The EDG game to me just seemed the biggest example of that, where every lane is just down CS, getting destroyed. They're just camping Jensen on repeat, punishing his flash timer. You know, the Cloud9's trying to go for plays in the side lane. They're just juking everything. They're TPing into backup. They've already called an earlier rotation, and it just doesn't even look close.
And I mentioned how like every single thing that can go wrong is going wrong. That'll be a common theme this episode, by the way. Get ready for that. And I just think of that moment where they finally have like the, I guess maybe you can call it a counter gank. I don't know, but then Blabber just autos the ward and the guy just slips away. Like plays like that are so demoralizing.
Well,
Do
that
you
didn't
do you
really
remember which
matter.
one I'm talking about?
I know what everyone talks about. Like him hitting the ward didn't matter. The guy was out.
You think so?
He was phase rushing out. Yeah. Plus,
I thought one more auto got him, but maybe not.
it wasn't even like the knockup auto anyway. It was just the first of the empowered autos from Q. So I think
Yeah,
he
he
just
was
runs
just really
away.
low on health. I thought he was dead. Maybe not. But anyways, the point still stands that anything that can go wrong is going wrong.
Yeah, it's all bad. Nothing good.
And then even in like then there's the game against I want to say I'm pretty sure it was T1. Was that the game where Berserker's playing Tristana?
Yeah, that's against T1.
Yeah, that's where like even they're down 10k and that's finally where they're having fights that we'll call close. Close in consideration to the fact that they're down 10k, right? The team fights are close, that they're almost getting kills and Berserker's almost getting resets and just can't. And you're going like, why can't the team fights at the start of the game be this close where like you actually have a chance of killing someone and getting some resets and snowballing the game? It's like, oh, we waited till we're down 10k before we get these fights that are, close, we'll call them. And then they just get completely cleaned up because it's just a wallet diff at that point. Like, ugh,
Yeah,
that was
they
that was a rough one.
probably dealt Aatrox's HP bar like 3 or 4 times in that whole team fight.
Yeah, and he just healed up the whole thing.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, we'll talk about Cloud9 a little bit more, but kind of just to close it off a little bit, for whatever reason, the way that they're actually playing out these games, and what I mean by that is how they go about drafting and then executing these kinds of game plans, just seems to be super weird. Where, I mean, Fudge is a player that they've put a lot of priority on in the past when it comes to picking him advantageous matchups, but it seems to be that that's really the only card up Cloud9's sleeve, because all 3 games now they've gone for their preferred top lane matchup, which is a counter pick against Aatrox. They've been up against Aatrox all 3 of their games, or no, was it 20 one of them? Might have just been Aatrox all
Can't
3
recall.
games, but it was just, 2 Fiora games and 1 Jax game for Fudge, and I know Fudge was catching a lot of flack on Reddit and Twitter for doing very poorly in advantageous situations, but it just simply comes down to Zeus just being better than him, and it's clear. And when you
That's the
kind
way
of
I look at it too.
yeah, when you go for that kind of a matchup where you're picking the counter pick, you're hoping that he's going to be able to beat him mechanically and play the skill matchup better, and he just doesn't. And sometimes you just got to accept that that's going to be the reality. Against some of these insane Eastern players.
I want to add on to that a little bit because I want to remind people that the idea behind this roster, yes, it was while LS was there, but the idea behind was that we're going to have players that are willing to pick something different and willing to get advantageous matchups and try to win that way. And I don't think even with LS leaving, I don't think that plan necessarily went out the window. I don't have any issue with him taking counter picks. You got to try to win, right? What are you going to do? Play something that's just boring and slowly lose? I don't have no problem with him taking counter picks. Yes, he got outplayed. That's going to happen at Worlds. Maybe it looks worse because you go for that counter pick and you get punished, but I mean, I don't mind them doing anything out of the ordinary. What we've seen in the past hasn't exactly worked either, so I'm cool with it. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I mean, the only one thing that made it a little weird was that last game against T1 where they had picked their preferred matchup, it seemed, getting the Fiora into Aatrox, and then all of a sudden they're on blue side and decide to ban the Fiora away instead of leaving up your pick of the litter for top laners. You know, they could have picked Aatrox, right away if they wanted to, but they gave it up and opted into the Jax counter pick. So it just seemed to be a little weird where all of these North American teams, for whatever reason, have the same sort of play style and identity where that playstyle and identity is completely different from what we're seeing with the LEC and then the rest of the tournament, basically, where we're seeing very little priority on champions like Aatrox and Maokai and very high priority on these early game type champions. And I think part of the problem with that is North America not scrimming against other regions before the tournament. Pretty much every single region just stayed in their they didn't travel to some boot camp or something. They only scrimmed the teams that they were able to scrim. So NA teams scrimmed NA teams, EU teams scrimmed EU teams, and then China and Korea are always going to continue to scrim each other. But it just seemed that if you didn't have that initial correct read on the meta when your scrim started up, you were behind. And that's, I think, where it all has gone wrong for NA is they just didn't seem to have the same read on the meta that these other teams did, and they were just getting smashed.
I think you're exactly right. Every year we always hear about how when Worlds comes around, it's time for NA to play catch up, and you hope that you have enough time to do that. And I think you're right in saying that like NA teams scrimming against other NA teams isn't going to get it done, right? When you have like obviously to beat the best, you need to practice against the best. And Cloud9 beating EG in scrims or EG beating Cloud9 in scrims doesn't really mean much of anything, honestly, because the opponents that you're going to run into are better.
Yeah.
You also mentioned the Maokai thing. I completely agree. I still think Maokai is honestly broken. I don't think I'm alone in thinking that. I think a lot of people are really surprised that that pick continues to get through. And the only game I remember North America getting it was Impact got it one game. Did we get it more than that?
No, it was just that impact when he was playing on against JDG, I think.
Yeah, and that was actually that was the game that Inspired was on Nidalee. And I was
Yeah,
like, okay, this is different. We're gonna have some Maokai roots into into the
I was
Nidalee
against
spear.
G2, sorry.
I don't even know if that I don't even know if that combo happened once. Like
No,
Maokai root
nope,
into
not a single time.
yeah. Um I mean that sucks. What I don't what do you say, man? That's trash. He was also kind of getting dunked on in lane too. What was he up against? Was he against Fiora?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was Broken Blade.
Yeah, they first picked a Maokai and then they ended up counterpicking with Fiora, I think, later in the
Yeah.
first rotation, but
I mean there was much bigger issues than that when it came um to EG.
yeah, I mean,
Um
talking specifically about EG, they do seem to have the similar mentality of Cloud9 where they're picking, at least in their first two games, they pick these very early and aggressive kind of drafts. We did see the set mid get ran back that we saw in the play-in tournament. And while I think that's a very good comp to use, I definitely don't think it was the right team to use it on in G2, mainly because they're just, for whatever reason, they're the team that seems to thrive in the chaos. I mean, I shouldn't say for whatever reason because their players are just, they've seemed to be like forged in the fire, and that's what G2 is kind of all about.
they play like fucking psychos in
Yeah,
a good way.
exactly. But it just, to me, felt like the wrong team to pull it out against. I much would have rather preferred them to do that as sort of like, I shouldn't say a cheese strategy because I'm not a big believer in that word cheese strategy, but I think it would have been better to do it against one of the LPL or LCK teams in their group. Um,
I
but
didn't mind it, honestly. I didn't mind it, like, into G2. Like, you pick it when you think it looks good in this draft or whatever, or, let's say you could even pick it I don't even remember when they picked it in the draft, but you could even pick it early if there's, like, a certain amount of bans that have gone your way where you think, like, "Oh, there's no terrible matchup for him," or whatever it be. I don't mind, I don't think you can be like, we're only picking it against these teams. I think if it's something you've practiced and you've had any amount of success with it, because we know there's been little success in scrims, or as that's what we're hearing anyways, you just go with what you've had some success with. And so if that was the reasoning, I'm totally cool with that. I think they did misexecute with it though. I think there was one crucial team fight where JoJo's just hanging out right in G2's face, and well, obviously they chunk him huge. And even though he's about to use the W, Tom Kench still devours him, and it's like, you can't really do that, honestly. Like, you can't devour Set. The idea is for him to kind of get chunked and then use his W as a massive shield to keep himself in the fight. If you're devouring the Tom Kench, I feel like, or excuse me, if you're devouring the Set, I feel like you've already lost that fight, and that's kind of what we saw happen in that game.
Yeah, it's funny because you told me beforehand that EG's worst game, like worst looking game, was going to be at G2. That they looked better against the LPL and LCK teams. I definitely would have believed you there. But
Yeah,
EG, uh, they've been competitive with the other teams. I mean, the games, it's not like Damwon and JDG just completely walked over them. Like EG is actually putting up a pretty decent fight, and I think part of that does sort of it looks a little similar to their times in the spring split from
agreed.
the LCS, where I don't know, they just seem to find these great mid game team fights where it doesn't really matter how ahead or behind they are. If they just get the engage that they'd like, they just I don't know, they're just good. They can figure it out on the fly sometimes, and you know, unfortunately, they're obviously not going to be able to do that consistently against some of the best teams in the world, but at a bare minimum, they're like showing signs of success from the past, which was good to see because with the whole Cowrie Danny situation, there
Mhm.
was a really good chance that EG just looked completely outclassed. I mean, there was probably everyone thought probably going into the group stage that EG was going to get smacked the hardest out of all these teams, but that's definitely not the case.
Yeah, I think it may feel silly to say, but I think most people would agree that EG is looking like the best of the O3 squad. It's like, grats, you're the best of the worst. But I still think that's the case. If there's any team that I could say has played somewhat good, I would probably give that to EG out of the three NA teams.
And then last up we got 100 Thieves. Dude, I was going through Twitter the last couple days.
Mhm.
People want to like blow their brains out when they watch 100 Thieves at international tournaments or something. Like, I'm just seeing so much flame. But like, man, 100 Thieves is like the worst NA team ever. Like, something, something, something. Abadage and FBI are so dog water. I was kind of caught off guard a little bit how down people seem to be on 100 Thieves. And yeah,
So you do or don't agree with it, with the flame?
I don't think they're like that horrible. People are making it out to be like they're the worst NA team ever we've sent to an international tournament.
I think what happens is you have them lose to a team that's not part of a major region, and people think this is my time to dogpile because that's the one that you should have, you know? And admittedly, I think they probably should have that game. I'm a little disappointed when you see who like that was their first game against CFO, and he's playing the Amumu. They're playing MF Amumu, which is pretty common now. And you see him engage into the Rel and the Kaisa, and I don't know, maybe he thought he had aftershock or something, but I guess it's a little disappointing seeing that they take that fight and they don't win that fight. And so that's the first red flag to me where I'm like, uh-oh, they don't know their matchups. They don't know when they win or when they don't win. Um, and that was a little bit of a, I don't know, a problem. And then the Kaisa ends up getting fed off of that, snowballs the rest of the game, and continues to be an issue the rest of the game. And I think they lose because of that Kaisa snowballing. And it all goes back to laning phase. And I mentioned earlier how there were so many games that were just lost in laning phase. That was one of them.
Yeah, I mean they yeah, I agree. I don't have much more to add there.
You could also point like, and the thing is, even though who he makes that engage, I actually agree. I mean, I didn't see what like flame you're talking about in regards to
It was
100
just
Thieves, but
general flame. It wasn't anything specific. It was just people being really upset.
I do think FBI has looked really bad, especially like his MF ultis. I can't remember which game it was.
It was the
They
Genji
were
game.
fucking useless. Yeah, okay, so
Yeah, that was
JT remembers which
yeah,
one it
it was
was.
the
Dude,
Genji
none of
game.
those ultis were useful. None of them. And that's pretty disappointing as well.
Yeah, I mean that was a game where Someday was actually looking pretty decent. That was like the pop off someday that we've been seeing for the last year and a half. And we all were saying, like, if 100 Thieves is going to be good at an international tournament, it's going to be someday is going to have to look like he's been dominating the LCS. And he did in that game, but the rest of his team were kind of useless.
Yeah, maybe he's looking like our best top laner, I guess. I could give him that award, if you will.
Well, it's
Um,
definitely not Fudge, so
yeah. And it's not really impact either. Although, like, I feel like that's a little bit unfair to focus on impact because I think almost everyone's playing pretty bad. But yeah, impact hasn't looked that good either. Um, yeah, I don't know where you go to fix things either. Even in their game today, they start off 2-0 with the Viego, and I'm like, oh, a closer Viego game. We've seen this pop off in the past. Maybe we have a chance. And I don't even remember where things went wrong in this game, actually, now that I think about it. They just didn't make anything happen with it. I don't even remember. All these games are like molding themselves together, I guess.
yeah, I mean, it doesn't really matter which. It feels like all of the same North American games can be just attributed to not finding the right engages or just failing on their engages. Because Cloud9, anytime they try to go for play in a side lane, they're failing their engages. 100 Thieves, they might have some like half decent moments in the team fight, but then for the most part, their team fighting has been pretty bad. And then EG is the only team that's been doing some good things, and they've been doing more good things than the rest, but still a lot of bad.
Yeah. And I don't want to dwell too much more on the '09 that we've had, um, specifically on the performances of the players and teams. I think it's pretty clear to say that it's bad. I want to kind of get into more of the discussion of, well, I mean, you saw the Reddit post, right, of the guy who's like, I've lost faith and I'm done, pretty much. That
Yeah,
Reddit post.
yeah.
Did you?
Hmm.
I I guess this is the part where we say like yeah, this is what being a North American League of Legends fan is like, honestly. Now, maybe it's a little worse this year because maybe '09 is a little bit to the extreme, but it's not far off from what we've seen in the past.
Yeah, I mean, to put a little bit of context into it, because the current meme obviously going around right now is that NA is going to be 0-18. And the way that it's looked, there's a real possibility of that happening. And I remember reading something today saying that the worst performance from a region that was considered a major region, meaning they had three or more teams, was the LMS when they went 3-15 two separate times.
How long ago do you remember?
It was
LMS,
they did it
like, that has to be a
once.
long time
Yeah,
ago.
they did it once in 2018 and once in 2017. They were like 3-15, all three of their teams combined record. And when we say like it's been worse, like, well, it hasn't been that bad. So if NA could at least win 3 games, then we might be saved a little bit.
Yeah, 3 games is looking rough to get, though. I mean, it's possible, but like 3 out of 9 when everyone's looking this bad in almost every position, that's a little rough.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, what Cloud9 would have to beat Fnatic, because they're probably not beating T1 or EDG. 100 Thieves would have to beat CFO, and EG would have to beat G2, I guess. But EG hasn't won
the
a
other
game off G2. C9 looks
e
horrible, and CFO, for whatever reason, seem to be underrated.
do you also think though that, um, even though things are going really, really bad, do you still feel like, to me, it feels like NA is still underperforming. That doesn't mean that I think NA should be, you know, again, going even with any of these teams or whatever, but like it still feels like North America is performing worse than they should be. Do you feel that way?
Yeah, I mean, if you would have said beforehand, like if every team went 1-2 in the first 3 weeks, like would that be a good thing or a bad thing? Because sure, it's a good thing that teams are winning games in difficult groups, but it's a bad thing because they're 1-2 and probably still out of position to make it out of the group. So definitely, I would call it underperforming, because if you would have told me if every team only had 1 win, I would think that that's an underperformance. So to have no wins on any team, that is most definitely an underperformance.
Do you remember someone mentioned like North America's win percentage in groups? I think it was like Jad or something. Wasn't it like 35% or something? Do you know what that is?
I
I
don't
don't
know.
know that stat. Um, regardless, it's not 0%. And so obviously you have to say that this is an underperformance. Even if they're not necessarily favored to win any of these games, North America still usually picks up some random wins here, and we just haven't seen it. Now that doesn't mean it can't happen in week 2, but we just haven't seen it. And I'm still, even with all of that said, I'm still surprised when I see Reddit posts of someone that's like, "I've been watching for 8 years and I'm done." And I'm like, "This is kind of where you draw the line." This has kind of been happening for a while. Again, not 0 and 9, but not far off from this. So I guess what I'm saying is, if you're a North American fan, I don't know why all of a sudden this is the year. Maybe it's because North America is hosting this year and it looks worse on home turf. I don't know. I don't know why this is suddenly the straw that broke the camel's back, I guess.
Well, no, I mean, I think maybe people are going a little bit overboard. I definitely think there is some reasoning for people being a little more critical than years past when the results have been somewhat similar, but we've never seen all three teams go 0-3. So I mean,
And I
that
don't
that
even
should
mind.
definitely be like the exclamation mark on the
Yeah,
situation.
and I don't even mind people being upset. I don't. I get it, honestly. I even tweeted this out just a couple days ago. Those losses hurt. I don't know why. All of a sudden, I'm like, yeah, it's another loss. Just waiting for the first one. That's kind of how I feel about it.
you're just you're done
Isn't that
already.
weird?
You've
I
lost all emotional.
I literally have become numb to the losses. Like, I was just watching the losses today. I'm like, oh well. I mean, what's the difference between 0 and 7 and 0 and 8? Oh, and what's the difference between 0 and 8 and 0 and 9? Like, I don't know. I've become a little numb to it, I guess.
Okay.
Like, I don't feel good. I can't pretend I feel good about it, but I'm like, "Okay, well, we'll see how they do tomorrow," or I guess in this case, Thursday or whatever it is.
Yeah,
Um,
Thursday's the next games.
and I think that's what being a North American League of Legends fan for, I don't know, decade now or whatever it is, it makes you tough, I guess. Mentally strong. Mentally strong, uh, full copium mode. Um Yeah, I guess I just don't feel that bad about it, even though I would. I mean, when they get that win, it's gonna feel great. It's gonna feel fucking awesome. Uh, but yeah, I guess I'm just not in the dumps anymore. I've gone full circle, I guess.
I would just urge people not to dwell on NA's poor performances and let that take away from the rest of the tournament, which I think has been super, super enjoyable to see a lot of these games between the LPL and the LCK. Some LCK teams looking really, really strong. DRX put up a really good showing today. Today being the last day of group stage part one.
Let's
Um,
get into the groups a little bit, right? You wanted to do a quick little
yeah,
touch on
well,
all of the different groups. Let's do that.
guess we'll do that.
And yeah, and also I guess that's the another thing of like the annual, every every time this time of year, it's like, okay, well, who's my second favorite region? This is the time where
Yeah,
North Americans got to choose for,
you pick
okay,
your
well,
other
are the
team to
NA
root
teams.
for.
Yeah.
Like, okay,
You
I'll pick
gotta like,
somebody and ride it out for the rest of the tournament. So who am I gonna pick now?
yeah. Do you have your teams already though? For you, like, you kind of aren't really an NA fan, so to speak, right? You
Yeah, I
have your
mean, I
your
like G
Cloud9
two.
fandom.
I like G2. I like DRX mainly because I like Deft.
Mm.
So G2 and DRX, I guess.
I'm a Damwon guy, but I really, really wanted EG to pick up that win anyways. I don't know. There's some things. What group are we getting to first, by the way?
I mean, we'll do Group A first.
Okay.
We talked about Cloud9 already, but I think the other main story coming out of this group is Fnatic being 2-1 and actually looking very, very strong. Much, much different compared to their sort of end of summer and even the beginning of the play-in stage where they were looking a little shaky. And I think they've had some really big individual performances from Humanoid and from Wonder, just straight up winning their lanes for the most part, which is part of the reason why they're looking so good.
Yeah, I mean that game against Cloud9 Humanoid. The thing is, it felt like Jensen was roaming a lot, and that's not like an excuse for why you're down in CS. The thing is, if you're gonna roam a lot, you need to get advantages somewhere else. And it felt like Humanoid knew that there was never any threat to follow Jensen, and so he just stayed mid and ended up perfectly farming. Which, by the way, is a fine strat. I know there's a lot of times that people will roam and people will blame the mid laner for not following. You don't always have to follow, and that's something that Humanoid definitely recognized in that game and was absolutely hard stomping Jensen. Not so much with killing him on repeat, but just being up a massive amount of CS, if my memory serves correctly.
Yeah, he was up like 40 CS at 11 minutes or something.
Yeah. So that, I mean, yeah, I, that's a lot.
Yeah,
A
and
lot.
I guess we'll go to T1. Obviously, oh yeah, they're another team that I'm definitely rooting for because how can you not root for T1?
Yeah.
Baker's the best. They're looking pretty good. Obviously they dropped that game to Fnatic, which was a little bit surprising because it wasn't like, it was sort of a back and forth game, which Fnatic sort of edged out. It was Fnatic being pretty dominant for the most part. T1 made a little tiny comeback at one point in the game where they won a team fight and then almost won another team fight. But for the most part, from start to finish, Fnatic dominated T1 in that game. But other than that one, T1 have literally destroyed. I mean, they destroyed Cloud9. It wasn't even close. And
Yeah.
they kind of put EDG in the dirt on the first day.
That was the game where Faker was on a collie, right?
Uh, which one against
I think it was
Fnatic?
against EG.
Yeah, he played Akali on.
He had a really good Akali game. I don't
He
remember
had
which one it
it
was.
was both of those. He had 2
Oh,
games.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, anyways, his Akali was looking really, really good, and that was I don't know, I guess it's just exciting when, again, you say, like, "How can you not cheer for T1?" For me, it's, "How can you not cheer for Faker?" And so whenever you see Faker even just getting kills, even if it is like, this is, like, the, uh admittedly like bad side of how I look at the game when I'm watching T1. But even if there's credit that should be going to the rest of the team, I admit that I'm still just excited to see Faker pop off. Even though I wish I didn't look at the game that way, that's the way I look at the games when I'm watching T1 because I'm just like, I just want to see Faker pop off. But I don't think I'm really alone in that though.
Yeah. I know we sort of referenced this last week a little bit, but this group is basically the copy paste of the TSM group from Season 10 Worlds, where it was a close group. I mean, not a close group, but a difficult group for everyone involved, which, Fnatic and Cloud9 weren't too far behind. But after the first week, the top 3 are 2-1, and the NA team is 0-3. And if y'all remember what happened, it ended with the
Yeah.
TSM 0-6. So I think it's pretty unlikely that Cloud9 is going to win a game in this group, especially with the way that Fnatic was looking, because it wasn't like just like Fnatic beat Cloud9 and then looked so much different in their games against T1 and EDG. Like Fnatic just looks good, and I just don't think that Cloud9 are going to beat him.
Before we move on though, if you were to pick a team for Cloud9 to beat, who is it? For me, it's still Fnatic anyways.
I mean, I have to say Fnatic because I don't think they're going to win the other two, but
Yeah,
that just
it's
should
like
further
pick
prove my
pick your poison.
my thought of their 0-6 potential.
Okay, so Group B now.
Yeah, Group B, your standard 3-0, 2-1, 1-2, and 0-3 with JDG at the top, M12, G23, and EG4. JDG, they're looking good. They're not looking like the runaway favorite that people might have expected and this super dominant LPL team that was just going to come in and smash everybody, but they still look
Mhm.
pretty good.
The thing is, I agree with you because, like, honestly, I kind of think they should have lost to EG, and I think even EG recognized it. Like, they were like, "Yeah, we should have had that win." And I mean, they threw it a couple different ways, right? They had Vulcan and Impact suddenly just checking Herald when they're making a play on the other side of the map, and that kind of ended up throwing things a little bit. So, um, yeah, I guess even though they're 3-0, I wouldn't say this is like the most solid 3-0 ever, despite the fact that they're looking good.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think Dem1 is looking pretty solid. Um, they're probably the Korean team that I feel the second best about behind T1, I guess. If I had to pick my confidence level in my LCK teams, it'd be T1 number
Mhm.
1, Dam1 number 2, DRX3, Genji 4, I guess.
There was a couple really nice standout plays from Dam One. They're looking pretty good. The Showmaker in their first game, I remember he did the really nice Azir sweep. Was that was G2, right? Where
Yep,
they just
that was,
completely
yep.
erased them
It
at
was
Herald.
like
Yeah, that game was
8.5 minutes into the
over
game, the game was just over.
yeah, that game was over quick. Actually, that was probably the most NA kind of game for G2. That was very reminiscent of how North America has been having their games where they just got completely clapped early and then couldn't crawl their way back. Um, you know what other play I really liked and I need to shout out was the Canyon play where he knew Kanavi was basing in the Herald pit and just Maokai queued over the wall to stop him and then ended up chasing him down. That was also a really nice like five head kind of play.
Hmm.
Yeah. Anything else on like G2 or anything else on the rest of the group anyways?
Yeah, it kind of feels like the most decided group, I guess I would say. And I say that just because it's the 3-0 with the 3-0 and the 2-1 teams of JDG and Damwon, I just feel like they're so much stronger than G2 and Evil Geniuses. Maybe G2 will make a group out of it and kind of get back some of those wins. But I don't know. To me, it feels like if I had to pick my most confident top two getting out, it'd be JDG and Damwon.
Yeah, you're saying like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I get what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, I agree. How can you watch this group so far and not think that, right?
Mhm.
Group C.
Group C, the group of life. It's looking good for EU.
I mean, I took Rogue in my pick'ems, but I can't say I actually thought that they were better than all of these teams. Kind of took them as a I really like their bot lane, and their bot lane had been performing well in playoffs. I hope they carried it over, and they did. So I mean, that's pretty good. I, they brought out the Soraka again. I love that, by the way.
It feels this group feels difficult to predict how it's gonna turn out because top esports just feel like this complete wild card of a team where there was just so much hype coming into all of 2022 about the roster, and at every step basically they seem to underachieve. And like if they just come out in 3-0 in the second half of the group stage, I wouldn't really be surprised at all and they make it out of the group. But obviously them sitting at 1 and 2 is not really doing themselves any favors, and Rogue especially having those 3 wins already is definitely going to help their chances to get out, because if top esports just suddenly kind of flip a switch and turn it up, having those extra wins is super important.
When I'm looking at top esports play, I like normally I'm all for the aggression, and normally I think like that's one of the things that gives LPL their success is just continuously looking to fight. But what the way it's looked though is their games they're getting some advantages, and then like one little slip up happens and the whole team's like we got to take this fight and we have to continue, like there's no hey we can just let our bro die, reset, and reevaluate things and take things slow. It feels very if we lose one guy then we're losing the whole team fight, the rest of everyone's following up and going in and dying, and that's kind of seemed what happened in the game against Rogue if my memory serves. And I don't want to take anything away from Rogue, but I thought Top Esports looked pretty bad in that game. Despite I think they got an advantage in that one. I don't know if I'm confusing it with the DRX game. Um, Regardless, one of those games, I remember thinking like everything looked fine. They had their lead, and then I don't know. They just needed to fight absolutely everything. One person gets caught, and it's like rather than just let them die, they have to break out a whole team fight, and they just throw away their lead.
Yeah, that's kind of what, I guess, to make a previous worlds comparison, they kind of feel like FPX from last year, where the game is just over either in their favor or in the opponent's favor fairly early into the game, because they're kind of just wanting to die on their sword and say, hey, if we're going to team fight, guess what? All the boys are coming and we're throwing them all in there.
Hmm. But yeah, pretty much the way the standings are right now pretty much does accurately paint the picture as to how the teams are playing. Um, I don't really have anything to say about GAM Esports, honestly.
Yeah, that first game, I think it was the first game of the day on Saturday, where we saw the first game from this group, which was Top Esports versus GAM. That,
Hmm.
like, dude, that jungle fight was the game was literally over at 4 minutes. Like,
I don't even remember it.
I just Gigabyte Marines just made kind of just like failed this invade, and Top Esports literally all showed up, killed them. But yeah, it's difficult to talk about GAM. They haven't really been at an international tournament. We haven't really seen the VCS at all. I think people were definitely not people weren't sleeping on the VCS, because I think people recognize that this is a good team and ones that have done pretty well at the World Championship in the past. But at the same time, not having any international experience for 2+ years is not really doing you any favors when it comes to knowing how to prepare and playing on the world stage. So they just seem super rusty. I don't even know. Like
Well,
it looks like they don't belong.
Worlds is always a rude awakening. We talked about how it's a rude awakening for North America every year, like and we've been going every year, right? And you get to Worlds and you have to play catch up. And to your point, if they haven't been here in so long, well, it makes catching up even that more difficult. So I guess that's what we're seeing with them. And then Group D.
Yeah. Similar situation to Group B, I guess, where the top two teams seem to be much better than the bottom two teams. However, at the same time, Gen G just have not looked like an LCK number one seed should look.
Not at all, honestly. I don't think they've looked very good. I think that they're 2-1. Maybe it. I think that's a big part of them being in a group with Flying Oysters and 100 Thieves. Honestly,
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think while they are 2-1, they don't feel like they are 2-1, at least in terms of their performance when you stack it up to some of the other teams in other groups who are even 1-2. So yeah, it's
and it's
just weird.
early, right? But I do think like you could point around to almost the whole roster and say that like they don't look quite right. Even Chovy's going for some questionable plays, and like you expect really good things out of Chovy. Ruler does not look very comfortable at all. His Senna game was kind of a disaster.
Yeah, the
Um,
whole Senna singed comp that they went for in that first game against RG just really kind of flopped on its face, it seemed.
And then even in the game against 100 Thieves, there's the one time where he kind of just walks up to Huhi, and Huhi, it's a nice engage on the Leona. He gets on top of him, but I'm like, you see him right there, you know he's gonna do that, and you gotta flash that. Like he had flash available, he's just slow on the trigger, and it makes me feel like that's not what we're used to seeing out of Ruler. Like I don't think I've ever seen Ruler be slow to react, and then he ends up getting pinned against the wall from Poppy and dies and blah blah blah. And they end up winning the game obviously because 100 Thieves is 0-3. But the point is, it wasn't like a clean Gen G is way better than 100 Thieves. Yep, big dub, move on. It was a you won that game because of how bad 100 Thieves looks rather than how good you look. Um, and again, 3 games in, right? Worlds is early going. I want to say that almost every year there seems to be a team that starts slow, but then kind of figures out their shit and then they go on a run. And that's definitely something that can happen with Gen G. Like nobody's going to be counting them out at all.
Yeah, they're gonna make it to the quarterfinals, so it's just a matter of if they can overtake RNG and have a much better second week, as to not have a super hard quarterfinal matchups. Because if this team doesn't pass RNG in the standings in groups week 2, they could be going up against a potential T1 or an EDG in the first round of the knockout stage. They could go up against JDG or Damwon if either of those two teams finish first in Group B. So this is definitely a situation for Gen G where they need to pick up their play, not only because they're not looking so good, but finishing second in groups is always a scary sort of task because how hard your quarterfinals matchups can be.
Right. Yeah, no, 100% right. Because, yeah, I mean, you said it. You're right. And then
Thanks.
Royal Never Give Up. Um,
It look good?
we talked a little bit last week about how like this year in particular might be the year that like the LPL has more depth with RNG being their 4th seed. Like this team is fucking good, man. And I mean, we saw that, right? I'm not surprised necessarily that they're 3-0. Maybe a little surprised, I guess, because they beat Gen G and like we had them as tournament favorites. But I like if you told me RNG is going to beat Gen G, that's not anything groundbreaking. Like RNG, even as a 4th seed, it's a Chinese 4th seed. That region is freaking good. So not really surprised. Jahu's a monster. Put him on whatever, and he'll perform.
Yeah, Breathe is looking really good. It's like the one guy that pretty much doesn't get talked about at all in RNG, and he's
Well, and not only that, but for us, he's the one guy that we haven't seen much of because he replaced Ben right in the middle of the year, and the last time we were watching RNG was at MSI.
yeah, that too.
So yeah. Where are we going next, JNT?
Yeah, I guess we'll talk about this whole LS gambling thing that's been going on, because I mean this isn't even limited to just League of Legends, but the whole gambling on Twitch thing has been a pretty,
It's been a hot topic lately.
yeah, I guess hot topic is the best way to put it, for probably the last year and a half maybe.
Yeah, and
And
it's one that doesn't seem to be going away, honestly.
yeah, just very
I mean,
recently Twitch made some updates to their policies. I don't remember exactly what it was, but a lot of it had to do with these crypto based casinos and betting websites. One that LS most recent or very recently has been sponsored by. So he seemed to be catching a lot of flame from the community for promoting this website when it has been such a hot topic for the longest while, and especially since these changes were just announced like 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, and I think the biggest issue, so there's a lot of differing opinions on this, but I think the one area where there's like a consensus like this is bad was the whole solo queue thing. And because people could bet on solo queue games, right? And there was a bunch of clips of like Tyler One saying that people are betting on his games. Revenge made a tweet about like how if you support this, you're basically griefing my games because he has seen his own name on the betting list. So you could bet on Revenge of solo queue games, and I think that's the one area where everyone's like, "Dude, this ain't cool. Like, this has got to stop." And as of today, even after we decided we were going to talk about this, that's when we saw that the whatever the website is that came out with the thing saying like we're not going to have um esports betting on solo queue anymore. But they, I think in that thing, didn't they say like they might bring it back or something?
Did they say that?
I it was towards the end. Maybe let me pull up the tweet. Uh
Oh, they did say it says, however, we are hopeful that we can bring them back in the future.
yeah, what does
That
that mean?
I think they're talking about the streamers,
Okay.
like not that.
Properly consuming.
Yeah, not the
We
betting on
apologize to our
solo queue
users who
games.
have been properly consuming these streamer markets the way they were intended. However, we are hopeful that we can bring them back in the future. Hmm.
Hmm.
That sounds a little like, no, don't do that. But I don't know. Maybe I'm interpreting wrong what they're trying to say here. But anyways, that's the area where it's like, yeah, it's pretty clear that that's not cool. The biggest issue that I had with it, I mean, don't get me wrong. I definitely have an issue with betting on solo queue games. I think that's obviously stupid. But the biggest issue that I saw was I saw General Sniper's name on the fucking list. Like, you're telling me that people are going to be betting probably thousands of dollars on this kid who's like 15? I don't think that's fair at all. Uh, I don't think it's fair for anyone in solo queue in the first place. Because you're not signing up for any of that shit when you're playing solo queue. You know, like if you play in the LCS, you're signing up to a team. You know that you're going to be like, in the I don't know public eye, if you will, or whatever. And there's a lot of things that you should expect by playing on a pro team. When you're playing solo queue and you're 15 years old, I don't think that you should have any of that kind of pressure on you just for wanting to play a fucking video game. But hey, maybe that's just me.
Yeah. And obviously, along with LS, people kind of did some digging and noticed that there are a lot of other channels and organizations and individuals that are sponsored by these kinds of websites as well. I'll just go through a quick little list. Cloud9 and Evil Geniuses apparently both have sponsors from these kinds of crypto-based casinos, as well as a lot of the other. I mean, I don't want to call out these other league podcast shows, but there's another Reddit post talking about how a lot of the Monte Cristo and Thorin um, podcasts have those kinds of sponsors, like the Jungle, Best Damn League Show, Summoning Insight. All those ones are sponsored by the same one. But it's not just LS, so I guess to see LS catching a bunch of flack for it, yes, he was the guy who was kind of initially called out for it, but I think there's other people that are equally to blame for the kind of a situation that we're in.
And that's if you are against the whole esports betting thing in the first place. There's some people that don't really care as long as it's like um, regulated or whatever. This is one where I actually really struggle because I'll admit I like esports betting. I don't do it very often, but I have done it over the last I don't even know how long. But I have to admit I'm getting real fucking tired of like everything being betting everywhere, man. It just feels like I don't know, ever since crypto, I guess. Maybe that's what
Yeah,
started it?
that to me that seems to be the biggest problem is a lot of these, as I've been saying throughout this entire time, these crypto based online casinos, the stake.com, even the one that LS was using. I don't even know what the name of it is. What is it? Esports bet?
Yeah,
I mean,
something like
yeah,
that.
esportbet.io. Part of it is with the whole cryptocurrency thing and it being not as closely regulated, or I don't even know if it's regulated at all. But this was the primary focus of the Twitch versus gambling thing that was going on a couple of weeks ago. And to me, I don't have a problem with the esports betting or wanting to bet on esports. That's fine, do that. But it's just about the pathways and the avenues that you're going about doing that is the most important
Yeah.
thing. And if you're doing it in a legal and in a legal, a space legal, not illegal, a space legal, a legal manner, then that's fine. Do whatever the hell you want.
Yeah. And I think that's mostly where I fall on it because like I'm not a huge CS:GO watcher, but like when I was watching it like a fair bit, there was a bunch of betting stuff up there,
Yeah,
right?
dude.
You always
I
saw
bet on my
adver-
skins in the past. I bet my skins in
and
the past, of course.
oh, I just meant like betting sites being advertised. Like the leagues have been sponsored by, or the tournament organizers have been sponsored by this betting site or that betting site, and never once did I even flinch about it. I was just like, yeah, people bet on stuff. And I think like I'm trying to think how I would feel if the LCS got a betting sponsorship. And the way I feel about it is I don't necessarily think it's wrong. Like if I never had an issue with CS:GO doing it, why would I have an issue with
Yeah.
LCS doing
Just
it?
give us a promo code for five free
But
dollars or something.
but it feels yeah, sure. It still feels like so tiring and like I've just been overdosed with so much oh, bet here, bet there and I just know that behind it is so many gambling addictions like I can't ignore that. And so that's why I struggle with where to fall on this because even though I personally don't have an issue with it, I can't ignore that there's a lot of bad that comes with it. So it's honestly a really complicated thing for from my point of view anyway.
Mm.
Anything else on the esports betting stuff?
No, we got some quick news to go through. First up, Orianna has been apparently disabled for the rest of Worlds due to some bug.
Yeah. I
And
didn't know that it was being disabled for the rest of worlds, but I guess that makes sense, right? Because I mean, you can't just quickly patch that stuff, right? I guess.
yeah, I
I mean, maybe
mean,
you could, but they won't. I don't know.
no, the normal procedure is they just disable the champion for the rest of the championship. I know, I forget how many years ago it was. Maybe it was season 6 Worlds, maybe it was season 5, maybe it was season 7. But they had to ban like Sejuani and Gragas because of some bug that was going on with the collision on their dashes, something like that. But that was the last
I
time I
feel
remember it happening. So
I feel like I'm more bothered by this than I really should be because we haven't seen a bunch of Orianna, but there's just been too much like too many Orianna shockwave plays that we've seen like at Worlds that
yeah,
are
they're
just
nerfing
highlight
Faker
reel plays.
again.
And yeah, and that's where I'm kind of like, man, what am I missing out on if it's banned? I know there's a lot of people that Boreana in the chat and they don't want to see Orianna. I think Orianna is a fun champion to watch play because I think you always see those massive team fight swings with that champion. So I'm kind of like, I kind of wish Orianna wasn't banned, but also we're not seeing it that much, so whatever.
Next up, Champions Queue. We always like some Champions Queue on this podcast here, but they're making some changes to the player base. So they've expanded their access to former pro and LCS Academy players, as well as higher minimum rank requirements for amateur players. And I think a lot of this has to do with some of the people who have been very outspoken about Champions Queue over the last couple weeks, especially when it comes to the World's Players Champions Queue thing and kind of the player base that's in that. But good changes. Changes are welcome.
There's been so much flame towards Champions Queue, and I guess I shouldn't be surprised at this point because anytime people get like, there's just such a high percentage of League of Legends players that anytime they get the chance to dogpile on Riot, they will. So like they see something wrong with Champions Queue, and it's like, oh, pitchfork time. But like I feel like the people running Champs Queue have been so receptive to the criticism and have done so many changes as the year has gone on. To me, it's still a very new project. And so, yes, there's lots of stuff that needs to be fixed. That's very obvious. But to me, it seems like they're doing a really good job of taking in that feedback and changing things. Maybe it's just me. I don't know.
No, I mean Champions Queue. It's been getting better and better each
Yeah,
split.
like people seem way too critical about it, but that's just my take. I think they do a great job. Um, if these problems were to persist over the next year or 2 years, then I could see people being really upset. But guys, like this is a whole new thing. I feel like people don't understand how difficult it is to implement just a whole new solo queue environment, whatever you want to call it, altogether. And I think, anyways, I think they do a good job. So I trust it'll get better.
Okay. Next up, Rogue and KOI. We talked a couple of months ago about KOI's sort of semi-acquisition of Rogue. And a lot of this has to do with their slot in the LEC. Rogue's not like officially leaving. It's going to be like both teams and both brands on one team. I don't really know exactly how that's working. They made some posts about it this week, but it sounds like going into 2023, it's like Rogue and KOI, but they're one team.
Didn't we talk about this last week?
Did we?
I thought we did.
I don't think
I
so.
guess my question was going to be if we did was what's the difference from last week, but maybe we didn't.
I don't think we
The thing
did.
is, sometimes you and I just talk in Discord, and I don't know if it's something we've talked about on this podcast before already, or if it was just a regular Discord conversation. But anyways, um, so wait, if I'm getting this right, if I remember right, they don't own the spot yet, and they're like leasing it or something.
No, oh, you're thinking of the Caramine Corp stuff that we talked about last week.
Oh, I
Yeah,
am.
KOI
That's
different.
that's where the that's where the confusion was. But I was like, man, I feel like we talked about this. Okay, different teams. My B.
Yeah.
That's with Astralis, right?
Yes.
Okay,
But it's
that's
all
where
a
the
rumor, so Lamau.
yeah. Whoops.
Well, speaking
What
of
else?
rumors, the big spicy rumor that came out earlier this week is that Bjergsen is out at Team Liquid.
Yeah.
What a fucking
What?
wild ride 2022 was.
Yeah. So okay, what do you think brought this about? I know bad year, bad everything was bad. TL failed. Blah 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 blah. But like, do you think this is a um we don't think Bjergsen is Bjergsen anymore, or do you think this is a we spent a lot of fucking money this year and our investors are fucking pissed, and so we can't spend for him again?
Well, if here's one little conspiracy theory I just thought in my mind right now, but
Okay,
what
feed me.
what if it's a situation where Core JJ was going to be out anyways, and Bjergsen didn't want to play on a team with Ayla and Yon and maybe an like a new top laner they bring in, a very unexperienced top laner in comparison to
And
people like
just a
Impact and Whippo and other things like that. So maybe Team Liquid shared their vision for what they want the roster to be, and Bjergsen was like, "Nah, I'm not feeling it," and wants to go test the waters with other North American teams or even the LEC, because it feels like every single time that Bjergsen has hit free agency in some capacity, there's always talk about him going over to the LEC. And I feel like if I'm Bjergsen, if I want to have like sort of one last hurrah, I would go do it in the LEC personally.
No, I think you actually make a good point, and just a reminder that the rumor was, I don't know if this was last week or 2 weeks ago or whatever, but the rumor was that they were looking to bring up talent from their academy squad. I don't know if they specifically said it was going to be the bot lane, but that was the area where most people said that TL Academy had a lot of success was their bot lane, and obviously Core JJ not looking like the Core JJ of old that we've seen or that we've come to know in the LCS. But there was also discussion that Core JJ and Bjergsen didn't necessarily see the game the same way was the other rumor. And so that's what had people saying like, "Oh, I wonder if TL is going to keep Core, who's been their guy for the last 3 years or whatever it's been, or if they're going to keep Bjergsen." And again, speculating, maybe we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but it's looking like neither. And if it's neither, that makes me wonder if like they're like, "Okay, we really got to cut back because we used 2 years of budget for one roster in 1 year." And so maybe that's the reason why they're not keeping Bjerger King.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it feels like every option's on the table for Team Liquid in terms of
Yeah.
what the possibilities are. But based on the information that we have so far and what people seem to believe is that TL is making changes and academy players are going to get pulled up to their main roster. And I know their mid laner it's like Harry, or it's not Harry. That's it's like I don't even know how you say it, but
Yeah,
it's like
I think that's
it's
what.
like Heari,
Yeah,
Hieri or
something like
something like
that.
that. I don't even know how to pronounce it, but he's also
You might
supposed to
be
be pretty
pronouncing it
decent.
right, but I know who you're talking about, though. I don't know the pronunciation either because I don't watch Academy, but I know who you're talking about. Um, one last fun little game that we could play is where's he going then?
Bjergsen?
Let's start taking some stabs. Yeah, where do you think he's going?
Um, I don't know.
There's the one that's in the back of everyone's mind. Come on, man. Everyone's got to wonder, is he going to go back to TSM?
Oh, if they go to EU?
If they go to EU. I can't tell how much of that is a joke because there was actually the rumor that maybe they were looking
Yeah. No,
at Europe.
I don't know. If I had to guess, I don't know. Maybe it's TSM. I don't know. It'd be hard to say. I don't think Cloud9 would want to get rid of Jensen. I mean, maybe they would, but
Derek sorry if I'm not saying your name right, but in the live chat is saying please not 100 Thieves. I think that's an option that's on the table. I think I could see him going to 100 Thieves because Abadage has been, even though I think mostly good, very inconsistent and maybe even a lot worse when the games matter more, right? because as playoffs came around,
Yeah.
he didn't look so hot, and then
And
Worlds
he
he
doesn't
hasn't
look.
looked so hot.
Yeah. We didn't even
And
talk about
and
him,
the
but
a regular conversation that happens, Double If Medios and Sneaky talked about this weekend, um, or over the last like couple of weeks actually. That like when things go wrong at Worlds, that's what breaks up a lot of rosters. And Double If said this kind of joking, kind of serious, but like maybe you don't want to go to Worlds because when you fail at Worlds, that's what breaks up a team. And maybe that's what could happen with 100 Thieves, who has been a team that people like to talk about this team for sticking together, sticking with this roster again. If they go 06, I could see some changes.
yeah, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. Anyways, I guess to take an actual stab, I'm gonna guess TSM, but I have no freaking idea. What I think would be really tragic is if he goes to C9. I think
Yeah, that would.
poor Jensen. If he goes to C9, I will laugh and cry.
I don't. I hope he just goes to Europe and actually does it and just goes back to LEC. I think he should do that.
I don't think he wants to. I think he probably had that option after leaving TSM. I think he wants to stay in North America. I mean, let's be honest, that's the league where he built his name. And that's the league where he probably has the most value. But I mean, maybe he goes to Europe. That's it's possible. I'm not saying it's out of the question. I just think he'd rather stay in North America, but definitely on the table.
Well, speaking of
Okay.
TSM, they got rid of Tactical, which I think nobody is surprised about.
Yeah. I'll just say it. I don't think we see Tactical in the LCS again. Now, maybe he can, right? Maybe he has like a sort of a Dokla thing where like he finds, or maybe even contracts, right? Who contracts has looked pretty bad before, then went to academy and still didn't look that great, and then built his way back up, started looking good in academy, got his chance again, and the contract had a good year. So I guess what I'm saying is, if
That
Tactical were to make it back to the LCS, I think it's a long road because I think he's fallen so far down from where we saw him that it's just he's not going to be in the LCS next year.
Yeah, I don't think so either. He'll probably get an academy spot somewhere. Um, and he might just have to grind it out and return to the top of academy and get his ticket back in the LCS and kind of just have to prove himself all over again. But that's best case scenario.
I could see him being a very good Darshan-esque player, right? Where you've got someone that's played the game for a while and can help newer players learn the game. I could like sort of like half coach, half player kind of thing. I could see him doing that.
I think the problem with that is those kinds of players, however, more often are the players that never reach that high skill ceiling but don't like int the game away. Like
Yeah,
those are like the Darshans, the Stixays. I feel like those are the kinds of people you're talking about. But the way that I would compare them to Tactical is a guy who had those really high highs, but has just been inting his ass off. Whereas the Darshan, the Stixay, maybe they never had those high highs for consistently a long time, but were always just a good, solid player with a lot of valuable information and good knack for the game. But Tactical doesn't seem to really have that to me.
yeah, I agree. What's next on the quick news docket?
We got something about Reckless has been streaming a lot more. I've actually been watching his co-streams or the live viewings. I mean, for the
Oh, have
audio.
you?
Yeah, I've his have been really, really good. I think. I don't know.
I
It's
feel like they would be a lot more informative
yeah.
than
They're
Double If Media Sneaky.
it's
I
purely
just
informative and not entertainment, but they're
I
really
just
good.
crack up way too much to not watch that co-stream. Like I know I would enjoy the Reckless one, but I just lose my shit laughing watching the
Oh yeah,
three
it's
dumbasses
hilarious.
talk about the dumbest shit ever, man. But did you see the Reckless clip when he's watching Cloud9
Yeah, versus
versus T1?
T1. Yeah,
That's a funny ass clip though.
yeah.
That was really good.
But the main clip that
Really
I
sad
was
honestly, but really funny.
the main clip that I was going to talk about here was Reckless talking about his time on G2, especially when he was going to when he basically found out that he was no longer going to be on the G2 starting roster, and he was working with Carlos to find a new team. And he was basically just kind of saying that him and Carlos ended up becoming enemies with how they were handling this, how G2 was handling the situation of finding him another team. And he was kind of comparing that to what's going on right now with Karmine Corp, because it's looking like they are going to enter the LEC and they are going to have Hansama on their team, and therefore Reckless is going to have a new team for 2023. And he said he wants to come back to the LEC, so But
It
it
sounds
sounds like
like
he's not a
they're
fan of Carlos either, like the
yeah,
rest
it
of
but
us.
it sounds like, K Corp is not holding him back from going to any particular team,
Yes,
whereas
that's
with Carlos, I don't know, it seemed like I don't remember exact quotes from Carlos, so someone stop me if I'm saying things wrong, but it always felt to me like Carlos was trying to make it look like he was letting players go where they wanna go, but that wasn't the case, like, even with Perks. I don't think Perks was allowed to go to Fnatic if my memory serves, and so it was like, "Well, you're going to North America then." And I don't think Perks necessarily wanted to go to North America because, well, I mean, why would you if you're an LEC star? Why would you really want to go to North America, right? So that's
damn.
the sense that I got, and the what I got from this was, yeah, that's kind of what we suspected, and now we know it to be true in at least one scenario. Um, that Carlos isn't the greatest guy that he tries to portray, honestly.
Yeah. And then last up, kind of part two of us talking about the world setups because there have been some problems. And a lot of players in various interviews after the group stage talked about the mic issues that they're having on stage where the noise in the arena is getting picked up and they can hear it very audibly in their headphones. And then also there was a pretty big thread on Twitter of LS taking some screenshots of watching Kanavi's pro view, and his FPS is going to like 80 during team fights. And if you've ever played on a bad computer where you have low FPS during team fights, it is just like completely hellish because you don't actually know what's going on. I can feel the pain there.
Do you remember last week when I said like we haven't seen the end of the scuffed?
Yeah.
Like we're gonna see more. This is kind of the shit that I was talking about. And last week we had the conversation of is Riot failing with Worlds? And I think the conclusion was not completely yes, but mostly yes. And I think this just adds to that.
Yep.
Like, are we going to see this happen when they go to the next venue, when they're in Atlanta, when they're in San Fran? Like, we're like a decade into freaking LOL esports, man. I don't know why they struggle so much, and I'm not going to pretend that we have the best fucking production there's ever been, but we don't get paid to do this shit. If you have what is the most popular esport in the world and you're getting paid to do a job, I'm surprised how often they have issues. And
Yeah.
I think generally, I usually try to err on the side of, well, like kind of forgiveness to Riot, but this is one where I just can't.
Yeah. I mean, especially with the last two world championships when they've been a little bit, kind of done on the fly with everything to go with the pandemic. So I think the events haven't necessarily been as strong as they have been in the past in terms like of issues popping up. And we have been cutting Riot some slack because, it's understandable to have some issues. But when we're back in North America, this has been something that is supposed to have been planned and planned correctly for the last like 3 years basically now. And to see once again a bunch of issues cropping up, it just kind of sucks. It's just like, come on, man, like what's going on here?
And I'll echo what I said last week. Even though this microphone stuff and FPS stuff, that's not scuff that the fans have to deal with. I still think there will be some scuff that fans have to deal with. And I'm going to reiterate what I said last week, where I'm saying, like, if you are going to this event, don't let that shit ruin it. Don't let, like, the small little Riot hiccups ruin what is a once in a decade event for a lot of people, right? Um, I mean, we're going this week. Like, we'll be in New York. We're going to go to group stage. We're going and they're gonna be 09 and I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have fun and I'm gonna enjoy it, right? And I think that's the way other people need to look at this.
Mm-hmm. Worlds is fun.
Beast. Is that it for quick news?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, pretty quick episode. I think we expected that, but the every time we say it's gonna be a quick episode, it never is, so we just stop saying it.
It's like just
But
over an hour. We did a good job.
yeah, yeah. Um, we think we're gonna be doing another episode this week coming up, guys. We don't know how. Nothing is for sure yet because different location. I'm gonna bring my mic and I'm gonna bring my webcam and all that crap, and maybe we'll try to figure something out. J&T lives pretty much in New York almost, so we'll try to figure something out there. I can't promise when the next episode's gonna be. I guess we'll try to do it when the group stage ends, maybe like immediately after, kind of like we did tonight. But who the hell knows? And another reminder, if you're enjoying the content, hit the subscribe button wherever you're watching it. Hit the follow button if you're on one of them things where it's a follow. I don't care. Hit those like buttons. Do the comments. We rely on you guys to help us grow this thing. Um, and we appreciate when you guys do that because it helps us quite a freaking bit. Um, really big shout out as well to all the people still watching North America. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
shout out
think we got
us. Shout out
the
us.
only people that are left, Jinter, are people that are not just North American fans, or hardcore North American fans that are just copium level 100. Like
Or
that's
the
one
people
thing
that
I
love
will.
watching any lose.
That's yeah. Well, that's why I said not North American fans, but sure.
Oh, okay.
Um, I'm putting that under my belt now. I'm gonna walk around with copium level 100. That's one thing I can take away from this is that I can still get ready for the next NA games and just prage. And that's what I'm gonna do.
We pray.
All right. Anything else you want to add on before we close out, Jinter?
No, I think that's it. Say your fucking prayers tonight for North America. Everybody.
Yeah, true. We pray. We pray. All right, guys. This has been it. This is it, rather, for this episode. This has been episode 103 of the Clown Fiesta podcast. We'll see you when we see you.